All right, hello everybody. I just wanted to make a little quick tutorial on those of you who are struggling a little bit with putting in your podcast RSS feed and getting that podcast connected to your blog. I completely understand there are a lot of things going on with these systems and with Wix and WordPress. Sometimes it is not as user-friendly as we would like. It's not as straightforward, but that just comes with figuring out your blog, that comes with figuring out the technology and just playing around and figuring out what you would like. But I do want to put in a couple of points for you that will significantly help you out. So as we see here, here is your main dashboard. The most of you are using Wix for your blog site. Some of you are using WordPress, but I'll get to that in a moment. So what you are going to do is you're going to go to Edit Site. Now, some of you are using an ADI, and this is where it can get tricky with connecting your RSS feed. Because you are not using the drag and drop system, which is fine, you will have to switch over to the drag and drop editor so you can fully put in your podcast. Because as we see here, when we go to add our podcast, it will show us all of the apps. Now, I have some of the apps already on here on this little sample site that I have, but there is no podcast site. So here is one option of what you can do. You can go to your HTML embed, and you should be able to add in your podcast URL. That would be the main URL for Anchor. But here is what I would suggest doing. So you are going to go down to the very bottom of your adding apps page. Once you go down to the bottom, you will see a little link here that says go to editor. Once you go to editor, you are switching to editor. That is going to allow you to have more options for drag and drop. It might seem a little overwhelming at first, but don't worry, you're not going to break anything. So I already have my editor pulled up. And actually, I have to go back to the beginning here so you can see how to do this. So on your left-hand side in your Wix editor page, you will see add apps. This is a Wix app market. This is only available on the editing. It is not available on ADI. What you are going to do is you're going to type in podcasts, pretty simple, and there will come up with a couple of different podcast players. I recommend the Wix podcast player, and we are just going to add that to our site. It'll just take a little bit. All right, yes. I want to save changes, and you will be in editor from now on. So just keep that in mind. That is how you're going to put your podcast in. Once your podcast player is in, you are going to go to settings, and you are going to connect your RSS feed. So I'm going to go to my podcast, and you should see podcast availability. I'll show you how to get there. You will go to settings, you will go to podcast availability, and this page will pop up. Now, my podcast is already connected to Spotify, and I already have my Anchor my Anchor URL. But you are only concerned with this, your RSS feed. So I'm going to copy it. Once I copy it, I'm just going to paste it in there, and it should connect. Once it has connected, you'll get a little green check, and boom, there we go. There are all of my podcasts all ready to go in the Wix player. So then you don't even have to click on a URL. That helps you with engagement. Your listeners can listen to your podcast right on the site. Another thing I would recommend is create a whole new page for your podcast. Don't have it as a blog post because then it can be kind of lost, kind of not very easy to find. So I would recommend putting in a separate page for your podcast. And by now you know how to do pages. You are fully capable of doing that. But again, it will switch from ADI to your editor. You should not experience any problems. You might have to move around and resize a couple of things, but everything should still stay about the same. If you do have any problems, please contact me, and I will help you out with that. Also, if you would like, you can connect your podcast to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, any of these, and you can put in that specific URL to your podcast. It takes a little bit of extra work, but do not distribute this RSS feed. If you put in an RSS feed, people will not be able to access that URL. It is not accessible besides putting it in for feed and for the blog to recognize that there is a podcast. What you can do if you are still experiencing problems is give a URL to your specific podcast. And you would do that not by copying up here, because this only shows me my dashboard, excuse me, but this copies your URL of your podcast. So let's say that my podcast is still not working. I am going to go into making a new blog post. So I'm going to add, and I'm just going to do this really quick. Obviously, you would put in a full blog post, a full page. You know how to do that from your settings, but you would just copy that URL there, and that should take you to the actual text. Make sure that you link that. There we go. We want this to link. We want this to be a web address, or you can specifically put it into Anchor. Either one will work. I would suggest putting it into Anchor because that is more specific. Now, that is all of the questions that we have for Wix. Let's go on to WordPress. Now, WordPress is going to be a lot easier than Wix because all you have to do is hit this top button and you are automatically connected to WordPress. And I don't have my account information right here at the moment, but all you have to do is connect that. The same thing with the RSS feed will pop up. You should be creating a separate page for your blog just so people can access that more easily. And if you have any other questions, honestly, you can go to Podbean. They have a lot of support for WordPress of embedding your player, embedding the WordPress podcast material. And that goes through all of that. I can include this link in the description of this video. Also, you can go to the Wix site. Wix also will give you information on step-by-step processing of what you need. But that is all the information that I have for you guys. Let me know if you have any extra questions. I know some people just work a whole lot better when seeing the information instead of step-by-step process. If you have any other questions, please let me know. I am here to help you, and I'm praying for you guys as you finish out the rest of this course.